Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Tony Gale, and I'm going to be doing the second part of our lesson and critique series on experimenting with photography. I am a Sony Artisan of Imagery. I'm also a BenQ ambassador, a Manfrotto ambassador, and X-Rite Colorado, in case any of those brands come up. And I'm a commercial photographer based here in New York City, primarily focused on people and portraits. As always, I want to thank Sony for having me and B&H Event Space for having me, because without them, I wouldn't be here. I don't currently have anything scheduled going forward with the B&H Event Space, but we will be doing some stuff in the fall. We just haven't figured it out yet. But if you want to get your Sony fix, or even if you don't shoot with Sony, if you just want some good education, some interesting things, there's a bunch of stuff coming up. Black and white photography with Thibaut Roland. Mahesh Thepa talking about Sony f4 lenses, which are actually great for carrying around because they're smaller. Mahesh also talked about ideal Sony cameras, compact digital cameras, shooting stars with Jess Santos, best accessories with Mahesh, and yoga for photographers with Autumn Schrock. So take a look at all of that. It's all on the B&H Event Space website, free to sign up. I also always mention Sony's Alpha Universe, which is a great resource to just learn more about photography, whether or not you shoot Sony. Obviously, you can learn a lot about Sony there. You can find out about whatever deals there may be at the moment. But it's just a great resource to learn. There's also the Sony Alpha Universe forums, a very friendly group of people where if you have questions or want to share something or just be part of a community, that's available through alphauniverse.com. There's the Alpha Female Plus Facebook group, which is a very, also very friendly and inclusive group. You do not have to identify as female to be a member. And every week they do a micro grant where someone wins $500 for submitting a picture based around a specific theme. Last week's theme was national parks. I know they just shared what this week's theme is, but I don't recall. And you do not have to identify as female to win the micro grant. Also, Sony just last week announced the long-awaited Alpha 6700 mirrorless camera. It's coming, looks like B&H says it will start shipping August 3rd. It's the new flagship mirrorless camera. So if you want a new camera, you don't want something full frame, it's worth taking a look at. It's got a lot of great features, 11 frames per second, 26 megapixels. It's a new sensor. And they announced a new 70-200 f4 lens. So the original 70-200 f4 was one of the first lenses that they introduced, was one of the first lenses they introduced for full frame mirrorless. And so this is an update on that lens. 70-200 f4 macro G, it's smaller, lighter, sharper, better stabilization, focus is closer, really looks like a great lens. I mention this every time or nearly every time. So those of you who've seen me a lot, you hear this every time. We are in an exciting time to be photographers. There's a lot going on. It's a crazy world, but the technology that is available to us, even for something like experimentation, which we went over last week, and then I'm looking at some of the images that people submitted this week. If you want to experiment with photography, if you want to try something new, it is so much easier to do that now than it was in the past. You don't have to take your film in, wait for it to get developed, spend money on film where it doesn't work. You can try something, see if it works, and immediately change whatever you're doing to make it work better or change the results. That's absolutely incredible. That features like the high ISO is amazing. The fastest ISO speed, ASA speed, that's what we used to say, ASA, not ISO. Film that I ever shot was 3200. It was the Kodak TMZ. The fastest color, I think, was 1600. And now, you can go to 64,000 with the Alpha 7S3. You can go to 400,000 ISO. It's noisy, but you can do it. And, the 1600 speed color film was pretty noisy. It is really an incredible time to be a photographer. All right, so we're doing part 2, lesson and critique, experimenting with photography. So in a second, I'm going to start going through the pictures that people submitted. I'll tell you what I think. I do want to lead with, and I mentioned this on the last critique, which was speedlights on location. People's opinions are just their opinions. If I like your work or don't like your work, it matters less than if you like it. And if you disagree with what I have to say, that's fine. There's no objective standard in photography. There are things that more people are going to generally think are better or worse than others, but what you want to do and if you're happy with it is the most important thing. So take anybody's opinion with a grain of salt, mine included. But it is good to get feedback. I think if 20 people tell you the same thing, it's worth considering. I've certainly had things where I've shown the same picture to 4 or 5 different people, and one person hates it, and one person loves it. And you just don't know. So this picture, for example, I mentioned on the last critique, this photo. I photographed this in Seattle years ago in the 90s. I showed it as part of a critique to a quite well-known fine art photographer at the time. And he told me, I don't know why anyone would take this picture. It was a picture I liked. I still like it. Would I take it today? Who knows? But it was a little bit like a gut punch when somebody says something like that. Frankly, I think it was too harsh of a critique, especially for someone, I was quite young. But later on in Seattle, I was showing work in coffee shops and bars, which I don't know if people still do that. It was quite a thing. It was a thing at the time. And the person curating the work picked this picture for the press release, and one of the local regional newspapers ran this. Is like a quarter page talking about the show. So well-known fine art photographer says, I don't know why anyone would take this picture. The curator of the show and whoever chooses things for the newspaper both liked it enough to run with it. So you just don't know. All right. With all that said, let's take a look. And if you do have questions or thoughts or comments, please go ahead and put them in. If I see them, I will mention them. Danny will hopefully pass some things on. One person wants to know that Zoom made it difficult to sign in. Hopefully it looks like you're in now, which is good. I don't know how to address that, but I'm saying it out loud in case Danny or somebody can. All right, so I put these into the slideshow, but I didn't really look at them very thoroughly, so that my first impressions would be whatever I'm saying here. This feels like fireworks, but it also feels like you don't usually see fireworks with such broad swaths of light. So whatever it is, it's very cool. It feels sort of like a firework that's a flower, which I know fireworks sometimes are supposed to look like flowers, but this feels more like it than fireworks in person often do. The colors are great. I really like it. I do wish that it was composed just a little wider so that the ends of these streaks of light weren't quite cropped out. Or alternatively, that it was cropped tighter so that it's boxed in on all 4 sides and we're cropping in a little bit on every side. So I'd either like to see it wider or tighter. But I do like the colors. I assume it was a long exposure. There are definitely going to be things I'm going to guess as to how things were done, and I'm going to guess wrong sometimes. So if someone is watching whose work it is and I guess wrong and you want to correct me, by all means, go ahead and put it in the comments and we'll mention it. But it looks like a long exposure. I think it's well done. I think it's cool. If it is fireworks, it's more interesting than a lot of fireworks shots I see, at least to me. I'm guessing this is the same person. Wow, I think this is quite cool, actually. If it doesn't even feel like a photograph, it feels almost like a painting. This one, I'm going to assume that they're both fireworks, even though I could easily be wrong. This one is cropped in tighter, and I like it better because it doesn't feel like we were just missing a little bit. I like the colors. I like the radial symmetry. I like that it's off center, so that the focus point is a little off center. It feels a little bit like the rule of thirds. I think it's very cool. I like this dog looking through. Could be anything. Could be a roll, paper towel roll, or toilet paper roll. It could be a tube of some. Well, it is a tube of some kind. But I like this. I think this is a great example of a way that you can simplify things and make things visually interesting. You know, maybe the space around the dog is cluttered and boring. Maybe it's not interesting, but this really focuses in on the dog, which I like. I think you did a good job with the framing because we're just getting that eye all the way in. If the eye was cropped a little bit more, I think it would bother me, but we're seeing just enough of it that I like it. The good eye contact with the dog. The dog did a good job posing. I like this. I like the tones. Good job. So soft focus, flowers. This feels like a little bit of a long exposure. I see some ghosting there. It feels, there was a group of photographers called the Pictorialists in the early 1900s that did a lot of sort of painterly, moody photography, and this feels like it sort of fits in with that. That little abstractness where it's a photo, but it kind of doesn't feel like a photo. I like the colors. I'm looking to see if I would crop it vertically, and you know what? I wouldn't. I like the cropping. I think I even like the cropping on the bottom. I was going to say that third flower on the bottom that I wish that I could see more of it, but I actually think it works. So I like the combination of colors, the warmth and the bluish purple. That yellow and green really pop. I think it's nice. So I assume this is the same person. So here it looks like we've got maybe a little bit of motion blur, maybe. Definitely some foreground elements. So of the two, I think I prefer this one, but this one is interesting. I always like foreground element stuff. I think that's a cool thing to do. I think it's a fun thing to include. It can help simplify and focus your attention on whatever your subject is. And I like that. The colors and the, balancing the green and the yellow and the blues and the purples and the warm of the background works really well. The soft focus, I think, is nice. Would I come in tighter? No, I don't think I would come in tighter. I like seeing that the negative space around. More flowers. So is this, no, they're not the same. This one feels, I'm curious if this was done a little bit in post, because it feels almost like a heart shape. If it was done in post, I'm impressed because it doesn't look like it. If you just found it, that's awesome too. I think the colors really work. It doesn't feel that experimental to me, but that doesn't mean it's not. So there may be things that I don't see what the experiment was, but that doesn't mean that the experiment didn't happen. I do like the shape of it. I wish that the shadow side was a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit of a fill card or something, a little, piece of white paper, even just to fill it in a little, because I think that heaviness on the bottom right is a little distracting. But the colors really pop, and I do think the shape that sort of feels like a heart is very cool. A little long exposure with a flash. This is very cool. I think that color really, really, really works. I assume it was a warm hot light because it looks much warmer than the dress itself. So combining a long exposure with a light with a flash is not always easy to do. And when it works well, it's very, very cool. And I think this works well and is very cool. It's almost ghostly, the dress and the shape around it. I think this is very cool. I think the version you sent is a little low res because it looks like it's breaking up a little, but I think that's just the resolution. But the colors work in using a warmer light so that the dress and the skin are even warmer than they appear here in the ghosted blurry part, I think is a nice touch. The spinning burning steel wool. So I'm guessing that this is two people, someone in the back doing the steel wool, and then this person with the helmet in the foreground, because I don't see them moving, but it's hard to say. That is an impressive amount of burning steel wool. I've seen a lot of burning steel wool shots, and some of them just feel the same as all the others. This is more interesting, especially with the sparks and the things coming forward, bouncing off the ground, and then hitting the walls and the frame. If you're someone who does this, just be careful that wherever you're doing this is not flammable, because somebody several years ago was doing a shot with burning steel wool in a national park and set a very old building on fire. So this looks like concrete walls to me. So it appears that this person was doing it somewhere appropriate. But just always be careful with that stuff. I like this, the helmet, it makes it feel like an astronaut or a spaceman of some kind, or spacewoman. It almost feels like if you've seen Stargate, like the Stargate, he or she is coming out of the Stargate. I think he did a nice job. I like the contrast in the colors, the very, very warm sparks and fire with the cool tones on the subject. On the person, I like it. And I do like, again, that bit coming forward and the fact that it's bouncing off the walls. Wow. So I don't know what this, maybe this is fireworks again. I don't know, but it looks cool. It's got an organic feel to it. This is one of the challenges with looking at experimental stuff, is it's not always clear what someone did. But I don't think you need to understand what they did to like a picture or not. You know, if we see something, we either think it's cool or we don't. Knowing that someone put 5 seconds or 5 hours into it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to like it more or less. This feels to me, even though that's not what it is, like it's an underwater thing with, they feel almost like sea anemones. But this combination of colors with that little bit of green in the background and the pinkish, reddish, and then the yellowish, and there's that little hint of blue on the upper right. I think this is really cool. Like the other one, I think with this, I might crop in just a little bit tighter so that if you look at the bottom, you can see the bottom is a little bit cropped. I might come in from the two left sides, left and right, and from the top a little bit and crop it a little so it feels cropped all around, or go a little wider, but I think it looks cool. So this feels like it could be a composite. It might be a composite with that person in the shadow in the foreground, with those people in the back. What it evokes to me is the idea of someone watching other people on a screen, or in a window. I don't think that's what it is, although I could be wrong. But it has an interesting feel. It almost feels like this person, the silhouette of this person, is watching the other people and keeping an eye on them, which is an interesting feeling. It's not something that would normally come to mind with me. But I do think it's interesting having this silhouette. on top there. I think I like the placement of the silhouette, although the two people on the trail further forward are distracting. If this is a composite, and it may not be, I might try moving the silhouette a little bit to the left so it's covering those two people, so that we just focus on the silhouette and the two people on the right. On the other hand, if it's not a composite, that's not an easy thing to do. And then forget I said that. But I think the cropping on the silhouette is nice. It's an interesting shot. All right, this looks like a reflection to me. Reflection shots are always an interesting, cool thing. I think we often forget to look at things like that when you're walking around in New York City in particular, and I don't know if this was New York City or not. There's just so many things visually that sometimes we stop paying attention and don't see them anymore because there's just too much. But this is cool. We've got the guy here. It gives it a little bit of grounding in amongst the abstractness, the shapes and everything. I like how vertical it feels. I think this in the middle there, we've got the two pieces of glass joined there. I might try cropping it so that we don't see that joint in the middle with those two metal things holding the glass. You might try cropping just the left or the right just to see. I don't know if that's better or not. Maybe having that glass so that it really reads as a piece of glass that we're looking through, it helps ground it. It's just, but I very much think having that figure there, the guy on the lower right, helps ground this picture and make it more visually interesting. Now the reflection, I like the two people, seeing those two people up there. I also like with this one that we've got all this weird reflection. And even though the stairs themselves aren't reflections, they are reflective. And then we've got that little bit of the city through the glass that's not reflective. So it breaks it up. We've got the abstractness with the more straightforward. Having that balance is nice. I even like on the upper right, there's some leaves from a tree or something, or a shrub of some kind poking in. And I even like that little bit of nature poking in. And I think having this as black and white was a good idea. I think it's successful in that. I think it looks cool. Another reflection. Oh, with that little tiny helicopter up there. I do shots like this a lot myself. I really think they're fun, where you really accentuate the height. You get the two sides, the glass there reflecting on the bottom, the building on the top. It's a great day for it with the blue sky and the clouds. Having that little helicopter there, I really like it. It adds a little touch of something. The colors are good. I like that. Very shallow selective focus. Making this black and white, I think is cool. Feels a little cooler, like almost like it's a blue, which I like. Having that very shallow depth of field on that pointy bit is interesting. It makes it feel like something to avoid in a fairy tale. You might consider, if you were to do a shot like this, again, adjusting your framing just a tiny bit so that pointy bit is a little bit more against the lighter colored leaf behind it. I think that might help set it off a little bit more, so it really stands out. But I do like the cropping. I like seeing that you're cropped in tight all around so that the little bit in the middle isn't too small, but it's small enough that it doesn't pull too much attention. I think it's nice. The long exposures on the New York City subway, always a classic. I always like long exposure subway shots. They're just cool. Especially with the person who's relatively still, so that you've got that juxtaposition of the movement and the stillness. The black and white really makes it feel timeless. I'm sure it's a relatively recent, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure of anything. I suspect it's a relatively recent shot. I can't tell for sure, although there's somebody in a mask on the left. So it must be relatively recent, but only one person in a mask. So it's not 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So it's relatively recent, but it feels timeless because of the black and white. And photos like this, where you're sort of capturing a snapshot of New York City, I just think those are cool. I think there's a lot of value to that. You know, we look now at pictures people took in the 80s and the 70s. For some reason, there's not a lot of 60s stuff. I don't know why. And we like seeing that piece of New York City history, right? That piece of the world at that time. So things like this are cool. And I think you did a good job. The motion blur is just enough. If it was much more, I think it might have gotten too blurry, and much less, then you start feeling accidental. I think you did a nice job. I'm not sure what the experiment is here, but I like his attitude. A lot of confidence in that guy. I think I might crop in a little bit from the bottom so that we don't see the arm, or shoot a little wider so that we see more of the arm in the hand. I think I might try that. And maybe also on the green space in the middle, there's a jumble of something. So I might even come in from the left a little and crop just past that latch. So just cropping in a little tighter, I think it might simplify things. But I like the confidence he has. It's a good balance with the dark sky back there. Capturing motion with skaters. Looks like he's mid-air, which is always a fun shot off that rail. I think you did a good job on cropping here. I don't know if you did this in camera or in post, but we're seeing everything. The frame is tight, but we're not losing hands or feet or head. I think you did a nice job there. I think if this were a little shallower of a depth of field, I might like to see that, just so that the people and things in the background would be a little softer, and because it feels a little distracting having that back there. But you captured a nice moment. Got a pigeon in London in front of Big Ben, the Houses of Parliament. I assume he's on the wall on the near side of the Thames, but there's something about it, about that deep depth of field, that makes the pigeon feel huge, which is kind of cool. It becomes this, it almost feels abstract because of that depth of field, like the pigeon is about to come stomping through London and look for Godzilla. I also like that the pigeon is exactly lined up with the clock tower. You're not cropped too tight on the top. I like the framing. So here, in shots like this, where there's a parade and everybody's taking a picture, I do like shots like you did here, whoever this is, where you have a picture of someone taking a picture, because I think that helps tell the story more than just documenting the event that's happening. You can see in the background a bunch of people with their phones up taking a picture. And if you're just trying to get no one with their phone, then you're not telling the whole story of what was happening there. So I like that you have that phone in the foreground. I think that adds a little something, and it helps translate what's happening. I like the colors. I think the square crop works. Feels like the focus might be Oh, the focus is on the background. So I would like to see this as well, where you focused on the phone, on the image on the phone, rather than the people in the background. It may or may not work better, but it's something that if I could see, I would be interested to see. This feels like a poster from the 70s or 60s. It feels like someone's like a psychedelic movie of some kind. Maybe Andy Warhol's doing something. And I think that's cool. I like the abstractness. I like the color. It feels almost solarized, like color solarized. And adding that feeling really is interesting. I think the colors work. I think the cropping is good. Yeah, I like that mood. I like that feeling. Oh, similar here. I like this one even more. I feel like that's probably a cigar in his fingers. I wish we could see a little bit more of the cigar. Or even if you just take that whole hand with the cigar, since the background is so dark, and just made that all black so that we didn't see it, so that it was just focused on his face. I think I might like that more. I'm just holding up my hand to block that. But I like the colors, and I like the mood of this a lot. I think without the hand might be a little bit better, but I like the cropping in terms of the hat down to the top of the shoulders. I like where his face is slightly on the right. I think that's very cool. I like her confidence too. This feels a little bit like the one of the guy in the stadium or whatever that was. I like that you can see her eyes a little bit through the sunglasses, so you can tell she's really looking at the camera. I'm not sure what the experiment was, if there was one. But again, just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And you know, you're all grown-ups, you guys can do what you want. I do feel like the woman in the black dress behind her is a little distracting. If you crop in from the right, I think you could just barely keep all of the woman who's the main subject's head in there and just crop at the elbow. And that, I think that would simplify things and make it a little bit stronger. Again, you know, do what you want. You're all grown-ups. But I do like the confidence. Her blue dress looks super cool. Feels a little bit like those fireworky shots at the beginning. All right, that's it. Not a ton of pictures submitted. Next time we do this, I hope that there's even more, although there were more than last time. So good job, everybody. I don't know if there's any questions. There sometimes isn't when we do a critique because it's such a simple thing. But I'm sure Daniel will let me know if there are. In the meantime, if anybody wants to learn more about me or about Sony, here's how you can do it. If you have questions in the future, you're welcome to reach out to me. As I tell people all the time, if you reach out to me and I don't get back to you, just reach out to me again. I try not to ignore people, but if I'm busy, I get distracted. And then I remember that somebody asked me a question. I don't remember what their name was, and I can't find that email. There was somebody with a Sony question several months ago that I didn't answer right away, and now all I know is that somebody asked me a question and I can't find the email, so I can't answer the question. All right, I don't see. All right, here's something in the chat. All right, so there's no questions coming in, which not a surprise for a critique. Oh, hold on. Will this be recorded? John, yes, John, they're all recorded. So this was recorded and is being recorded as we speak, and will show up on the various B&H event space places. I believe it'll be on the Facebook channel, Vimeo, YouTube. You'll definitely be able to watch it again if you care to, or to not watch it again if you care not to. All right. Anybody else? Any other questions before we wrap it up? If not, hopefully I'll see you at the next thing. and go take more pictures, make some cool stuff. All right. Thanks, everybody.